Hi, I'm Ken Jackson, professor of English at Wayne State University, and I'm the instructor for the course. I just want to do an up close and personal little chat before we start. Shakespeare was born in 1564 and he died in 1616, and that puts him smack dab in the middle of what used to be called the English Renaissance. Now, scholars tend to refer to that time period as the early modern period. And I point that out at the very beginning because it zeroes in on a crucial fact for us as we move throughout our study of Shakespeare, which is the term early modern specifically links Shakespeare's world to ours, the modern world. And it does so in a particular way that I want to hammer home early on, looking you straight in the eye, sitting up close and personal with the computer and the web cam technology, which is that Shakespeare is the playwright, the artist, who reveals to us with quite exquisite and profound artistry, for the first time, a modern sense of the self or the I, that little part of you that says, I'm unique, I'm special, I'm an individual. If you're of a certain age, you've been told that since preschool, if you're lucky. That understanding of the I or the self, even though you experience it as natural and normal, so much so for me to even point it out to you might seem a bit odd, is not natural or normal. It's historically determined. It really isn't available in art or in history before Shakespeare. And that's one of the reasons Shakespeare is considered so important in the Anglo-American literary tradition, frankly, in the Anglo-American thought tradition. He reveals to us with particular acuity that modern sense of self, even though he's in the early modern period. One way to think of that in technological terms is when you look back at Shakespeare, you are looking back as far as you can with the naked eye. That is, you don't need any special training to read his plays or see his plays or understanding. Sometimes people mistakenly refer to them as being in Old English. They're not, they're in modern English. Old English or Anglo-Saxon is an earlier form of the language for which you need special training to read and understand it. That's the language of Beowulf, for example. You might have read in an intro to literature course. But Shakespeare in the early modern world allows us to look back and see ourselves, that understanding of ourselves as an I for the first time. And that's critical. And I just wanted to start out by giving you that brief overview in this short little snip with me looking at you as close as I can, up close and into personal, to think about that for a second. It's counterintuitive. When I ask who you are, you have a distinct sense of yourself, a name, an identity. But again, what I want you to do throughout this course is to consider that that sense of self hasn't always been around. Let me give you just one piece of history, an important piece of history, to make that point clear. During Shakespeare's lifetime, religiously what was going on was the Reformation. And that's a break within the Christian church itself, with a number of reformers, namely Martin Luther and John Calvin, argued that the Catholic Church had become too invested in liturgy, had moved too far away from its roots. It had argued that people's way of referring to the divine or relating to the divine had been constructed around intermediaries in a way that it needn't be so. What Luther and Calvin argued consistently and again and very effectively was that to have a relationship with the divine, you needed to have a sense of personal faith, a sense of identity that really wasn't around before. So that historical change is critical to understand Shakespeare. And we're going to talk a lot about the Reformation. We're also going to talk a lot about the shift from medieval scholasticism to Christian humanism. We're going to talk a lot about the shift from feudalism to capitalism. We're going to talk a lot about something called the civilizing process. These are all historical processes which forge and shape that sense of the I, that sense of self, that sense of oneness that we all have, that we all experience as perfectly normal, and try to show that it appears or shows up in history not by accident. It happened over time, and reading Shakespeare's plays, reading them closely, gives us a good sense of how and when and why that happened.